The biting Chicago wind whipped around me, a familiar companion. It was the kind of wind that seeped into your bones, a constant reminder of the grit and determination it took to survive, let alone thrive, in this city. I stood on a half-finished skeleton of a building, the raw steel beams reaching towards a bruised, overcast sky. The year was 1985. I was 35, hungry, and armed with little more than a set of tools, a borrowed truck, and a dream so big it felt foolish to even whisper it. My name is Frank Kowalski, and this was the genesis of Kowalski Construction. Back then, construction was a generous term for what I did. It was me, usually alone, hauling lumber, digging foundations by hand when I had to, and patching up leaky roofs for whatever meager sum people could scrape together. My hands were perpetually calloused, my back ached more often than not, and sleep was a luxury I rarely indulged in. But with every nail driven, every wall framed, a little piece of that dream solidified. I wasn't just building houses, I was building a future, a legacy. My wife, Mary, God rest her soul, was my rock. She worked double shifts as a waitress, her smile never faltering, even when the tips were thin. She believed in me and my vision when no one else did. Her quiet strength was the mortar that held my spirit together during the lean times. We lived in a cramped apartment, the scent of cheap paint and sawdust a constant in our lives, but it was ours. And the thought of building something real, something lasting, fueled every long day and sleepless night. I remember one particularly brutal winter. The snow was piled high and the work dried up like a cracked riverbed. We were down to our last few dollars, the rent looming, and the fridge looking emptier than a church on a Tuesday. I spent days poring over blueprints, trying to find a way anyway to keep the lights on. Mary, bless her heart, started selling the few pieces of jewelry she had, little trinkets from her mother. That's when I knew I couldn't give up. Not for me, but for her. I took on a ridiculous underpaid job, a barn repair in sub-zero temperatures. The wood was frozen solid, my fingers were numb, and I was sure I'd lose them to frostbite, but I finished it. And that small victory, that sliver of earned money, was enough to keep us afloat. It was those early struggles, those moments of sheer desperation, that forged the company. Every setback was a lesson, every hardship a building block. I learned to negotiate, to manage, to anticipate problems before they arose. I learned the value of a handshake and the cost of a broken promise. I learned that reputation wasn't built on fancy offices or slick advertising. It was built on sweat, integrity, and delivering more than you promised. Slowly, painstakingly, Kowalski Construction began to grow. I hired my first employee, a gruff but skilled carpenter named Joe, then another. We moved from leaky roofs and small renovations to full home builds. The designs got more ambitious, the projects larger. The Chicago skyline, once a distant aspiration, became my canvas. I started to see my name on projects, on buildings that would stand for generations. It wasn't just about making a living anymore. It was about making my mark. It was about proving that a kid from the wrong side of the tracks, with nothing but grit and a dream, could build something monumental. Looking back from where I stand now, 65 years old, with a company that spans half a continent, it's easy to forget the raw hunger of those early days, but I never do. The smell of sawdust, the ache in my back, the gnawing fear of failure, they're all still vivid. They are the foundation, the bedrock upon which everything else was built. And as my own children, raised in comfort and privilege, begin to eye the company, I can only hope they understand the true cost of what I've created. The office now was a far cry from the cramped corner of my garage where I'd first sketched out blueprints. Polished mahogany desks, framed awards glinting under recessed lighting, and a view of the city that made my stomach clench with a mix of pride and unease. It was the culmination of decades of relentless work, of sacrifices I couldn't even quantify. Kowalski Construction was a household name in the industry, a symbol of quality and reliability, and I, Frank Kowalski, was its architect. My children, Sarah and Michael, were approaching their late 20s. Both had been educated at prestigious universities, armed with MBAs and a sophisticated understanding of corporate finance. They had grown up in a world of comfort, a world I'd painstakingly built for them. They had never known the gnawing uncertainty of an empty bank account or the ache of physical labor. They knew success, but they didn't know the struggle. Sarah, my elder, was sharp, ambitious, and possessed a keen business acumen. She'd spent her post-grad years in high-powered marketing roles, climbing the ladder with an efficiency that mirrored my own, albeit in a different arena. She saw the company, and more importantly, my position within it, as the logical next step in her career. She spoke of market expansion, strategic acquisitions, and optimizing profit margins with a fluency that made me feel a pang of something akin to irrelevance. Michael, my son, was more laid-back, charming, and had a natural ability to connect with people. He dabbled in a few entrepreneurial ventures that, while not outright failures, hadn't quite hit the mark. He lacked Sarah's laser focus, but possessed a certain charisma that could win over clients and employees alike. He saw the company as a stable platform, a legacy to inherit and perhaps refine. He'd talk about sustainability initiatives and employee well-being programs. Important concepts, no doubt, but they felt like abstract notions when I thought about the bare-knuckled reality of keeping a construction firm afloat. They approached me, separately at first, then together with a proposal. They wanted to take on more significant roles within Kowalski Construction. Sarah envisioned a co-CEO position, or at least a COO role with significant operational control. Michael saw himself as head of client relations, perhaps even spearheading new development projects. Their eyes gleamed with ambition, with the certainty of youth that they could take what I had built and elevate it to even greater heights. "Dad," Sarah began, her voice crisp and confident, during one of our meticulously scheduled family business meetings, "the market is shifting. We need to be more agile. My experience in strategic brand management can help us reposition Kowalski Construction for the next generation." Michael chimed in, leaning back in his chair, a relaxed smile on his face. "And I think we can really tap into the luxury market. People want more than just a house. They want an experience. I've got some ideas for how to build that brand." I listened, nodding, a knot tightening in my chest. They spoke of strategy and branding, of market share and ROI. They spoke of management, of oversight, but not a single word about concrete, about steel, about the smell of freshly cut lumber, about the sheer physicality of building. They hadn't spent a single day on a job site, hadn't felt the searing heat of a summer's day, or the bone-chilling cold of a winter's freeze while pouring foundations. They hadn't wrestled with a stubborn subcontractor, or negotiated a tricky zoning permit. "It's not just about numbers, kids," I found myself saying, my voice rougher than I intended. "It's about knowing the dirt under your fingernails. It's about understanding the weight of a beam, the integrity of a foundation. It's about the people who do the actual work." Sarah gave me a patient, almost condescending smile. "Dad, that's precisely why we need to bring in modern management. We can leverage technology, optimize workflows, and ensure the legacy continues without you having to be bogged down by the day-to-day." The implication hung heavy in the air. "You're bogged down. You're old school." I looked at them, these bright, capable people I had raised. I loved them dearly, but a cold dread began to creep in. They wanted to inherit the empire, but they had no desire to understand how the walls were built. They wanted to run the machine, but they had never learned to turn the crank. The foundation of my dreams was solid, but I feared the edifice they envisioned might be built on sand. The site was a sprawling suburban development, a testament to Kowalski Construction's success. Rows of elegant, custom-built homes were taking shape, each one a masterpiece of modern architecture and solid craftsmanship. This was the kind of project that put food on tables, that paid salaries, that funded the comfortable lives my children now led. And I was here, as I often was, walking the grounds, my boots crunching on gravel, my eyes scanning every detail. My site manager, a man named Dave, a grizzled veteran with a knack for problem-solving, met me near the entrance. "Morning, Frank. Bit of a snag with the plumbing on Lot 12. Old Man Henderson's crew is saying the soil composition is worse than anticipated." "They're talking delays." I nodded, my brow furrowed. "What's the proposed solution?" "They want to reroute, but that means rethinking the foundation specs on the west side, and it's going to cost us, naturally." Dave kicked at a loose stone. "These guys, they always find a way to pad the bill." This was the reality. The messy, unpredictable, often frustrating reality of construction. It wasn't about elegant spreadsheets or projected profit margins. It was about solving problems on the fly, about understanding the materials, the weather, the human element. It was about making tough decisions that impacted real people, real jobs. Let me talk to Henderson myself, I said, already striding towards the Lot 12 foundation. And get me the original soil reports. I want to see what we were dealing with from the start. As I walked, I saw my crews at work. The rhythmic clang of hammers, the low rumble of excavators, the shouts of instruction carried on the wind. These were men and women who understood the meaning of hard work. Their faces were etched with the sun and the wind, their muscles corded with the strain of their labor. They were the engine of Kowalski construction, the hands that turned my vision into reality. They were the ones who didn't shy away from the dirt, the sweat, the sheer physical exertion. I stopped to chat with Miguel, one of my framing crew leaders. He was a quiet man, but his work was impeccable. He'd been with me for over 20 years, having started as a young immigrant with limited English. He was now a homeowner, his kids in college, all thanks to the opportunities Kowalski Construction had provided. "Everything all right, Miguel?" I asked. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "See, Frank, no problems. We are on schedule for the framing on this one." He gestured to the skeletal structure rising before us. "Good wood, strong bones. That's what we aim for," I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. Strong bones. Later that day, I met with Sarah and Michael in my office. They were reviewing quarterly reports, their faces illuminated by the glow of their laptops. "Dad," Sarah said without looking up, "I've been looking at the subcontractor costs. It seems we're over budget on labor by about 8% this quarter. We need to tighten the reins. Perhaps renegotiate some of these long-term contracts. And some of these suppliers," Michael added, scrolling through a different spreadsheet. "Are we getting the best deals on lumber and concrete? I've been doing some research and there are companies offering better pricing for bulk orders." I sighed, the familiar weight settling on my shoulders. "Sarah, the 8% you're seeing is due to unforeseen circumstances, like the soil on Lot 12. It's the cost of doing business, of adapting. And Michael, these aren't just suppliers. These are people we've built relationships with for years. Their reliability, their quality, that's worth more than a few percentage points difference in price. You can't put a price on a solid partnership." They exchanged a look, the kind that said, "He just doesn't get it." "But Dad," Sarah persisted, her tone still measured, "in a business context, we have to be objective. We can't let sentimentality dictate our financial decisions." Sentimentality. Was that what they called loyalty? Was that what they called understanding the human cost of cutting corners? I thought of Miguel, of Dave, of the countless other men and women who poured their hearts and souls into every project. Their livelihoods depended on the decisions I made, and their dedication, their skill, their sheer willingness to get their hands dirty. That was the unseen labor, the invisible foundation, that they couldn't quantify in a spreadsheet. "Sometimes, Sarah," I said, my voice low and steady, "the most important numbers aren't on a balance sheet. They're etched on a man's face in the pride he takes in his work. That's the labor you can't see, but it's the most valuable asset this company has." They looked at me, their expressions unreadable, and I knew the chasm between our understanding was growing wider with each passing day. Negotiating. It was an art form I'd honed over decades, a delicate dance of pressure and compromise. It wasn't just about getting the lowest price. It was about securing fair terms, ensuring quality, and building relationships that would weather the storms of the industry. Today's challenge was a hefty contract for the structural steel on a new high-rise project downtown, a flagship development that would redefine the city's skyline. The client was demanding, the timeline aggressive, and the steel fabricator, a company called Apex Steel, was known for its quality but also its stubbornness. I met with Arthur Jenkins, Apex's owner, in his no-nonsense office, the air thick with the scent of machine oil and exhaust. Jenkins was a man who valued directness and a firm handshake, a kindred spirit in many ways, though his own ascent had been less about building from the ground up and more about mastering the intricacies of a specific trade. "Frank, good to see you," Jenkins said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Heard you're looking to put up another giant. Arthur, you know how it is. This one's a showstopper. We need the best. And that means you." I laid out the proposal, the specifications, the timeline. Jenkins peered at the documents, his fingers tracing the intricate drawings. "Ambitious," he conceded, "but your timelines are tight. And the price you're offering, it's on the low side for this kind of work, Frank. We're talking custom fabrication, precision engineering. This was the opening move. I knew Jenkins wouldn't budge easily. "Arthur, we're talking about a long-term partnership here. Kowalski Construction doesn't cut corners, and neither do you. I'm not just looking for steel, I'm looking for reliability. The kind of reliability that means my crews aren't waiting around because your fabrication is off by a millimeter." I leaned forward. "What if we adjust the payment schedule? A larger upfront deposit, and then milestone payments tied directly to fabrication completion. That should ease your cash flow concerns, right?" He considered this, tapping a pen on his desk. "It's a start, but the price still needs to come up. We've got overheads, Frank. Skilled labor doesn't come cheap, and neither does the reputation I've built," I countered, my voice firm but not aggressive. "You know my company. You know we pay our bills. You know we deliver on our promises. That's worth something. What if we agree on a slightly higher price, but you commit to delivering 10% ahead of schedule on critical components? That gives us buffer, reduces our risk, and ultimately benefits both of us." We went back and forth, discussing tolerances, delivery logistics, potential penalties for delays. It was a chess match, each move calculated, each concession weighed. By the time we shook hands, the deal was solidified, a mutually beneficial agreement forged through years of understanding and respect. Later that week, my children were reviewing the Apex Steel contract. "Dad, this price is higher than our initial projections," Sarah stated, her finger jabbing at a figure on her tablet. "And the early delivery clause, while offering a buffer, also implies a premium we might not need to pay if our own project management was more efficient." "Did you even try to negotiate them down on the unit price?" Michael asked, looking genuinely perplexed. "Jenkins is a tough negotiator, but surely there's some wiggle room there, especially if we commit to a larger volume." I took a deep breath. "Sarah, the premium you're talking about is the cost of certainty. It's the price of knowing those steel beams will be on site when we need them, not a week later. It's about avoiding costly delays that ripple through the entire project. And Michael, Arthur Jenkins and I have been doing business for 20 years. He's not just a supplier, he's a partner. His loyalty and the quality he guarantees is worth more than a few percentage points. We built this company on relationships, not just transactional deals." "But, Dad," Sarah insisted, her voice laced with frustration, "that's not a sustainable business model. We need to constantly optimize for cost efficiency. Relying on relationships can lead to inefficiencies and missed opportunities. And what opportunities are we missing by getting the best possible steel, delivered on time by a fabricator I trust implicitly?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "What's the cost of a structural failure because we went with the cheapest bidder who cut corners? That's the kind of risk you can't quantify on a spreadsheet, but it can sink this company in a heartbeat." They stared at me, their youthful certainty clashing with my seasoned pragmatism. They saw a line item on a contract. I saw the foundation of a skyscraper, the livelihoods of hundreds of workers, and the culmination of a dream that started with my own 2 hands. The art of the deal for me was about more than just the bottom line. It was about building trust, ensuring integrity, and delivering a product that stood tall and strong, just like the company I had built. The boardroom was sleek, modern, and filled with the hushed reverence that often accompanies serious financial discussions. My children, Sarah and Michael, sat across from me, their faces alight with the enthusiasm of a new venture. They had been consumed by the idea of expanding Kowalski Construction, of taking it national, even international. Their proposals were ambitious, meticulously researched, and, I had to admit, compelling in their scope. "So, Dad, the plan is solid," Sarah began, gesturing to a complex flowchart projected on the screen. "We leverage our existing infrastructure, acquire regional construction firms in key markets, Texas, Florida, California, and integrate their operations into the Kowalski model. We'll focus on high-density urban development and luxury residential projects." Michael nodded eagerly. "We've identified several potential acquisition targets. All have strong local reputations, but lack the capital and strategic vision to scale. We can offer them an attractive buyout, integrate their teams, and immediately expand our footprint." I listened, a familiar knot of apprehension tightening in my gut. They spoke of synergy, market penetration, and scalable business models. They had projected growth charts that soared like rockets and financial forecasts that promised exponential returns. But as they outlined their strategy, I noticed what was conspicuously absent: the how of the actual building. And the actual construction, I asked, my voice cutting through the confident buzz. Who's overseeing the sites? Who's ensuring the quality? Who's dealing with the concrete pour on a Tuesday afternoon when it's raining buckets? Sarah gave me a patient smile. Dad, that's where the integration comes in. We'll implement standardized Kowalski construction protocols across all acquired companies. We'll bring in experienced project managers from our existing operations, and we'll invest in advanced construction management software to ensure efficiency and quality control. Software, I repeated, the word tasting foreign on my tongue. You think software can replace a foreman who knows his crew, who can read the weather, who can tell by the sound of a drill if something's wrong? It can certainly enhance it, Dad, Michael interjected smoothly. Think about real-time data on progress, material procurement, budget tracking. It allows for proactive problem-solving rather than reactive crisis management. I leaned back in my chair, the plush upholstery feeling alien. This was their vision. A future built on spreadsheets, algorithms, and the acquisition of existing structures, rather than the hands-on creation of something new. We're talking about building more than just buildings, kids, I said, my voice low. We're building communities. We're building livelihoods. We're building trust. You can't quantify that with a piece of software. You can't acquire that with a business deal. But Dad, this is how businesses grow in the 21st century, Sarah argued, her tone earnest. You built Kowalski Construction from the ground up with sheer grit and hard work. Now we need to build it into a national powerhouse. That requires strategic acquisitions, efficient systems, and a focus on scalability. And what about the people? I pressed. The men and women who actually swing the hammers, who pour the concrete. Do they just become lines of code in your new system? Michael shifted in his seat. Of course not, Dad. We value our workforce. We'll implement training programs, competitive benefits packages. We'll ensure they're well taken care of. But we also need to ensure they're operating within efficient, standardized frameworks. I looked at my children, their bright eyes full of ambition, and I felt a profound sense of disconnect. They saw the blueprint for a business empire. I saw the blueprint for a way of life, a craft passed down through generations, a tangible connection to the earth and the materials we shape. Their future was about expansion and efficiency. Mine was about integrity and the sweat on a man's brow. The blueprint for Kowalski Construction, as they envisioned it, felt like it was being drawn with a different ink entirely. Dad, this is crucial, Sarah's voice was urgent, laced with a hint of exasperation. The potential investors are coming next week. They want to see a prime example of our work, something that showcases our capabilities and our commitment to quality. We've narrowed it down to the waterfront development project or the new corporate headquarters in the financial district. I sighed, the familiar weight of their corporate jargon settling in. The waterfront is a beautiful project, Sarah. Top-notch work. But the financial district one, that's a testament to what we can do in tight urban spaces, complex logistics. It shows real grit. Exactly, Michael chimed in. And it's closer to the city center, easier for them to access. Plus the architectural design is more cutting edge, which aligns with our forward-thinking image. I grunted non-committally. They were talking about image, about perception. I was thinking about the foundations, the steel, the concrete that held those buildings up. I'd spent more time on construction sites than in any office, and I knew the real story wasn't in the polished glass and gleaming steel, but in the unsung labor that made it all possible. All right, I conceded, we'll show them the financial district project, but I'm taking them on a proper tour, not just the lobby. The day arrived, a crisp autumn morning with a bite in the air that reminded me of the early days. My children, dressed in sharp suits that looked out of place amidst the dust and scaffolding, met me at the site. Sarah had her tablet. Michael had a slick presentation folder. I had my worn leather work boots and a keen eye. Dad, perhaps we can start with the executive suite on the 45th floor, Sarah suggested, her voice polite but firm. It offers a panoramic view of the city, which is always impressive. We'll get to the views, I said, my voice a low rumble. First, let's go see how this beast is actually breathing. I led them past the security checkpoints, through areas still bustling with activity. The noise of machinery, the shouts of workers, the smell of fresh paint and welding fumes. This was the symphony of creation. Sarah clutched her designer handbag tighter, her eyes darting nervously around. Michael, bless his heart, tried to maintain a facade of casual confidence, but I could see him subtly straightening his tie. We descended to the sub-basement, the heart of the building's infrastructure. "This is where it all begins," I explained, gesturing to the massive concrete foundation. "This concrete, poured day and night for weeks, is what holds everything up. It's engineered to withstand incredible loads, seismic activity." I pointed to the intricate network of pipes and conduits. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC. Every single one of these has to be perfect, installed to precise specifications. A single leak, a faulty wire, can cause millions in damage and put the entire project on hold. Sarah was trying to follow, but her gaze kept drifting upwards, as if searching for the executive suite. Michael, however, seemed genuinely engaged, asking a few tentative questions about the structural supports. We moved up through the floors, my commentary focusing on the practicalities. I talked about the challenges of working in a confined urban space, the meticulous planning required for material delivery, the coordination between different trades, the electricians, the plumbers, the drywallers, the painters. I introduced them to a few of my foremen, men who had been with me for years, their faces etched with experience. "This is Miguel," I said, clapping a broad-shouldered man on the shoulder. "He's been framing for Kowalski for 20 years. His crews are the best. They don't just frame a building. They give it its skeleton, its strength." Miguel offered a gruff nod and a small smile. Sarah offered a tight-lipped, "Pleased to meet you," while Michael gave a more genuine handshake. As we finally reached the executive suite, the investors, a distinguished group, were already gathered, marveling at the view. Sarah launched into her well-rehearsed presentation, highlighting market trends and growth projections. Michael chimed in with talking points about innovation and client satisfaction. But as I stood there, listening to their polished words, I couldn't shake the image of the men working in the sub-basement, the sound of the welding torches, the sheer physical effort that had gone into creating this monument of glass and steel. The real story, the story of sweat, dedication, and unwavering commitment, wasn't in the panoramic view. It was in the unseen labor, the solid foundation, the skilled hands that had built it all from scratch. I hoped more than anything that the investors saw that too. The quarterly review meeting was always a tense affair, but this one felt different. The air in the boardroom, usually thick with the hum of industry, was charged with an unspoken friction. Sarah and Michael had been pushing hard for a complete overhaul of our operational structure, advocating for a more centralized, top-down management approach. They saw my hands-on, relationship-based style as an anachronism, a relic of a bygone era. "Dad," Sarah began, her tone precise, "we've analyzed the productivity reports from the last 6 months. The discrepancy between our older sites and the new developments is significant. We need to implement standardized procedures across the board. This includes unified procurement, standardized scheduling, and a more rigorous performance evaluation system for site managers." She slid a thick binder across the polished table. It was filled with charts, graphs, and flow diagrams, a testament to her diligent research and strategic thinking. It was, in essence, a blueprint for how to strip away the personal touch, the inherent flexibility that had been the hallmark of Kowalski construction. "Performance evaluation," I echoed, the words feeling like a slap. "These men aren't numbers on a chart, Sarah. They're skilled tradesmen with families to feed. They've been with me for years, some for decades. They know their jobs." "And they're doing a good job, Dad," Michael added, trying to mediate. "But perhaps there are efficiencies to be found. If we can identify best practices from our most successful projects and implement them universally, we can boost overall output and reduce costs." "Best practices," I repeated, a bitter taste in my mouth. "Are those best practices written down in some manual? Do they account for the day a crucial delivery is delayed by a hurricane, or the time a subcontractor's best welder gets sick and we need to find a replacement on short notice?" "That's precisely why a standardized system is necessary," Sarah countered, her patience wearing thin. "It provides a framework for dealing with unexpected challenges. It ensures consistency, regardless of individual circumstances." I looked at them, these bright, capable children of mine, and I saw the vast chasm that separated our understanding of how a business, a construction business, actually functions. They saw a machine to be optimized, a system to be streamlined. I saw a living entity, built on the strength, skill, and loyalty of its people. You're talking about turning my company into a factory, I said, my voice low and steady. My strength has always been in my relationships. Dave, Miguel, Henderson, these aren't just employees or subcontractors. They're people I trust, people who trust me. We communicate, we solve problems together, we adapt. That's not inefficiency, that's resilience. But Dad, it's not scalable, Sarah argued. You can't be everywhere, overseeing every detail. As we expand, this approach will break down. We need systems that can operate independently of your constant oversight. So what, you want to replace me? I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Michael quickly jumped in. No, Dad, not at all. We want to free you up, to focus on the big picture, the strategic vision. Let us handle the operational details. The operational details are where the company lives and breathes, Michael, I retorted. They are the foundation. You can't build a skyscraper on a foundation of abstract strategy. It needs to be solid, tangible, built with care and precision. I looked at the binder, the neat charts and graphs representing a vision of Kowalski construction that felt utterly foreign to me. It was a vision of efficiency, of predictability, of growth, all laudable goals. But it was a vision that seemed to disregard the human element, the grit, the adaptability, the very soul of the business I had poured my life into. The generational divide wasn't just about age, it was about fundamental philosophies. They saw the future as a series of calculated moves on a chessboard. I saw it as another series of foundations to lay, one solid brick at a time. The new project was massive, a gleaming testament to Kowalski Construction's enduring success, a state-of-the-art research facility for a cutting-edge biotech firm. It was the kind of project that demanded precision engineering, cutting-edge materials, and an unwavering commitment to deadlines. Sarah and Michael were thrilled. They saw it as the perfect showcase for their modernized management approach. "This is it, Dad," Sarah declared, her eyes shining as she spread the blueprints across my desk. "This facility will put us on the map in the high-tech construction sector. It's complex, requires meticulous planning, and aligns perfectly with our new integrated management system." Michael nodded enthusiastically. "We've already assigned lead project managers from both the Chicago and the newly acquired Texas office. They'll be working in tandem, utilizing our advanced project management software to ensure seamless communication and execution." I studied the plans, the intricate details of sterile labs, clean rooms, and advanced HVAC systems. It was impressive, no doubt, but my mind kept drifting to the practicalities, the unseen challenges. "This requires a whole different level of precision, Sarah," I said, pointing to a section detailing the environmental controls. "Contamination is the enemy here. One mistake in sealing, one misplaced ventilation duct, and months of work could be compromised." "Precisely why our system is ideal," she responded. "The software tracks every component, every installation, every inspection. It creates an auditable trail, minimizing the risk of error." I tried to explain. "But what about the human element? What about the experienced tradesman who notices something subtle, something the software can't detect? Like a hairline crack in a concrete pour that could compromise structural integrity down the line, or a slight misalignment in a pipe that could cause pressure issues." "Dad, we have protocols for that," Michael assured me. "Any deviation from the plan, any on-site observation that requires a change, needs to be logged and approved through the system. It ensures transparency and accountability." Transparency, accountability. The words felt hollow in the face of the tangible reality of construction. I remembered a time years ago on a different project when a young apprentice, barely out of his teens, noticed a faint tremor in the ground during a concrete pour. He didn't have a system to log it. He just knew something felt wrong. He alerted the foreman, who, trusting the young man's instincts, halted the pour. It turned out a minor sinkhole had opened up beneath the foundation, undetected by the initial soil tests. If that pour had continued, the entire structure could have been compromised. That was the kind of insight that came from experience, from intuition, from being present and truly engaged. "Your system can't account for intuition, kids," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "It can't account for the gut feeling of a man who spent 30 years working with concrete. It can't replicate the judgment of a foreman who knows his crew and knows the building." Sarah's expression grew serious. "Dad, we respect your experience truly, But the company is growing. We can't rely on your personal oversight for every single project. We need systems that allow us to replicate success consistently and manage risk effectively across multiple sites and regions. Replicate success, I mused. My success wasn't about replication, it was about creation. It was about overcoming challenges, adapting to the unexpected, and building something solid with my own hands and the hands of men I trusted. They were planning for a future where Kowalski Construction operated like a well-oiled machine, efficient and predictable. I worried that in their pursuit of efficiency, they were inadvertently building a company that lacked the very soul, the very human ingenuity that had brought it into existence. The legacy project, I feared, might become a monument to their modernity, but a tombstone for the spirit of hands-on craftsmanship that had defined my life's work. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a trowel. We were weeks behind schedule on the downtown high-rise, and the blame game had officially begun. The electrical subcontractor, a company called Electrico, run by a notoriously difficult but skilled proprietor named Sal, was dragging their feet. Their excuses ranged from material shortages to crew illness, but I suspected a deeper issue. They were overextended, juggling too many projects. "This is unacceptable, Sal," I said, my voice tight as I stood in the partially wired electrical room, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light filtering through the unfinished windows. "We're on the hook for penalties, and my client is breathing down my neck." Sal, a barrel-chested man with a perpetual scowl, crossed his arms. "Frank, you know I run a tight ship. These delays aren't my fault. The supply chain's a mess, and I can't get the specialized conduit I need. Plus, my best foreman is out with the flu." Sarah, standing beside me, stepped forward. "Sal, our project management software indicates that the conduit was ordered weeks ago. Furthermore, our records show a consistent shortfall in man-hours reported compared to the project schedule. This suggests a problem with resource allocation, not just external factors." Sal scoffed. "Software? What does your fancy computer know about the real world? I've got 20 guys on my payroll, Frank. They're not robots, they get sick. Sometimes materials get delayed, it happens. It happens more when you overcommit, Sal," I shot back, my patience fraying. "You took on too much, and now it's impacting my project, my reputation." Michael tried to interject. "Perhaps we can offer some assistance. We have connections with other electrical suppliers, and we could potentially loan some resources from our other sites if it helps get this project back on track." Sal eyed him suspiciously. "Loan resources? You think I need charity? I'm a businessman, Frank. I deliver, but I deliver when I can, not on some corporate-dictated timeline." "Your delivery is costing me a fortune," I said, my voice rising. "I need solutions, Sal, not excuses. What do you need specifically to get your crews working at full capacity on schedule?" He thought for a moment, his scowl deepening. "The conduit. I need that specialized conduit. If you can guarantee delivery of that by Friday, and we get a revised payment schedule, a little something extra for the inconvenience, we can make up time." Sarah immediately protested. "A revised payment schedule and a little something extra? That's not in the contract, Sal. We can't just capitulate to every demand." "Sarah," I cut her off, turning to her, "sometimes in this business you have to make tough decisions. We need this project completed. The cost of these delays is already mounting. Paying a bit more to get it done is cheaper than the alternative." I turned back to Sal. "All right, Sal, you get that conduit delivered by Friday, and your crew's working double shifts if necessary, and we'll talk about a revised payment. But I want it in writing, every detail, and if there's one more hiccup, one more excuse, I'm bringing in another subcontractor, and you'll be footing the bill for the transition." Sal grunted, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You got a deal, Frank. Friday, and we'll be working overtime." As Sal left, Sarah turned to me, her face a mask of disapproval. "Dad, that was a capitulation. You let him strong-arm you. We should have held firm. We have the legal standing." "Legal standing doesn't build buildings, Sarah," I replied, rubbing my temples. "Relationships, even difficult ones, do. Sal is difficult, but he's a good electrician. He knows his stuff. Sometimes you have to bend a little to keep the wheels turning. That's the real world, not a software simulation." Michael, ever the diplomat, added, "I understand your point, Dad, but Sarah's right. We need to ensure our contracts are ironclad and that subcontractors adhere to them. Relying on personal negotiation every time can be risky. I looked at them, the frustration evident on their faces. They saw a compromise as weakness. I saw it as a necessary tool, a hard-won skill honed through years of navigating the messy, unpredictable landscape of construction. The subcontractor showdown was a stark reminder that the business of building was as much about managing people and their egos as it was about managing schedules and budgets. And in that arena, my experience often trumped their algorithms. The new research facility was progressing, but the whispers of trouble were starting to surface. Not from the project managers or the architects, but from the ground, literally. I'd been getting uneasy reports from Dave, my most trusted site supervisor, about the concrete work on the clean room floors. It wasn't living up to the stringent specifications required for that level of precision. "It's the finish, Frank," Dave explained, his voice grim during one of our hushed phone calls. "It's not as smooth as it needs to be. There are micro-imperfections, tiny voids. The biotech guys are going to have kittens." I drove out to the site, my gut churning. The place was a hive of activity, but as I walked the areas in question, I could see what Dave meant. The concrete, meant to be a perfectly seamless, impermeable surface, had a subtle unevenness, a slight porosity that wouldn't pass muster for a sterile environment. "Who's doing this pour?" I asked, my voice low. "It's the Specialty Concrete Solutions crew," Dave said, spitting the name out like a bad taste. "Hired them because they promised expertise in high-spec finishes. Seemed legit." "Seemed legit doesn't cut it," I muttered, kneeling down to examine the surface more closely. I ran my hand over it. The texture was rougher than it should be. "This isn't right. We've got to rip it up and do it again." When I relayed this to Sarah and Michael, the reaction was predictable. "Rip it up?" Sarah exclaimed, her voice laced with disbelief. "Dad, that's $250,000 in materials and labor, plus weeks of delay. We have sophisticated quality control protocols in place. How could this have happened?" "Protocols only work if the people executing them understand the stakes, Sarah," I said, my patience wearing thin. "And if the materials and techniques are correct. This Specialty Concrete Solutions crew clearly didn't deliver. We were sold a bill of goods." Michael looked concerned. "But Dad, if we have to redo it, we'll incur significant financial losses. Can't we try to patch it? Or find some kind of sealant that can smooth it over?" "Michael, this isn't a patch job," I explained, my voice firm. "This is a clean room. The integrity of the surface is paramount. Any imperfections could harbor contaminants, compromise the sterility. It's a fundamental requirement of the design. Patching it won't be enough. We need to tear it out and do it right." Sarah was already pulling up reports on her tablet. The initial soil analysis was sound. The structural design is approved. All the prerequisites were met. This failure seems to be purely operational. "Operational, yes," I agreed. "And that operational failure is that we trusted a subcontractor whose expertise was clearly lacking for this level of work. You can't software manage concrete. You need to understand the mix, the pour, the cure. You need experienced hands and eyes on the ground." I looked at my children, their faces etched with the anxiety of projected losses. "Look, I know this is going to hurt the bottom line, but the cost of doing it wrong, the cost of a failed facility, the cost to our reputation, that's far greater. We build things to last. We build things right. That's the Kowalski way. Sometimes the concrete reality is that you have to tear down a bad pour and start again." I knew they were already calculating the financial fallout, the impact on quarterly earnings, but as I looked at the flawed floor, I saw not just a financial setback, but a stark illustration of the difference between theoretical management and the unforgiving hands-on reality of construction. Their systems might track progress, but they couldn't guarantee quality when it mattered most. The concrete reality was that sometimes the only way forward was to go back to the beginning and do it right. Family dinners used to be a sanctuary, a time to reconnect, to share stories, to simply be a father. Now they felt like strategic planning sessions disguised as meals. Tonight was no different. The air in the dining room, usually filled with the aroma of Mary's, now outsourced to my lingering discomfort, home cooking, was thick with unspoken tension. "So, Dad," Sarah began, carefully cutting into her roasted chicken, "Michael and I have been discussing the expansion into the West Coast market. We've identified San Francisco as a prime target, given its strong tech industry and demand for high-end residential and commercial construction. Michael nodded, swirling his wine. We've prepared a preliminary prospectus. We're looking at acquiring 2 established firms there, one specializing in luxury condos, the other in commercial retrofits. The synergy would be immense. I took a slow sip of my water, my gaze steady on my children. San Francisco, that's earthquake country. You plan on building there. You need to understand the seismic codes, the soil conditions, the specific challenges of building in that environment. It's not like Chicago. Of course, Dad, Sarah replied, her tone patient. We've factored that into our risk assessment. Our structural engineers have reviewed the relevant codes and will be engaging with local seismic consultants. Our integrated project management system will ensure adherence to all local regulations. Software adherence, I scoffed. Does your software know the difference between a P wave and an S wave? Does it understand the subtle shifts in ground density that can make or break a foundation in a tremor? It flags potential risks based on geological data and building codes, Michael interjected, and we will have experienced local engineers on the ground overseeing everything. Overseeing, yes, but are they going to be the ones on the ground, feeling the earth move, making split-second decisions? I pressed. Or will they be sending reports back to some central server in Chicago? Sarah sighed, her patience clearly waning. Dad, we can't operate on instinct and anecdote anymore. The company has grown too large. We need standardized, data-driven decision-making. Your approach worked for a smaller operation, but it's not sustainable for a national enterprise. My approach built this company, I said, my voice firm. It was built on understanding the land, the materials, the people, not on algorithms and market projections. You're so focused on scaling up, you're forgetting what made us strong in the first place. We're not forgetting, Dad, Michael said gently. We're evolving. We're building on your foundation, but we're adding new technologies, new strategies. We want to take Kowalski Construction to the next level. The next level might be a level too far if you don't understand the ground you're building on, I warned. San Francisco isn't just another market. It's a different beast, and if you don't respect its power, it will remind you of it. The conversation continued, a familiar dance of their ambitious plans and my ingrained skepticism. They spoke of market share and ROI, of mergers and acquisitions. I spoke of soil tests, of stress loads, of the unforgiving power of nature. The generational divide was stark, not just in our methods, but in our very understanding of what it meant to build, to create, to leave a lasting legacy. The family dinner, once a haven, had become another battleground for the soul of Kowalski Construction. The call came on a Tuesday, a day that started like any other, filled with the usual corporate maneuvering and the steady hum of business. It was from a David Chen, the CEO of a burgeoning green energy company called Solara Solutions. They were developing a massive solar farm project in the Nevada desert, and they needed a construction partner with a proven track record in large-scale infrastructure. Mr. Kowalski, Chen began, his voice clear and professional, we've been impressed with Kowalski Construction's reputation for reliability and quality. We're looking for a partner who understands large-scale projects and can deliver on time and on budget, with a strong emphasis on sustainable practices. Sarah and Michael, who were present during the call, exchanged excited glances. This was exactly the kind of high-profile, forward-thinking project they were eager to pursue. After the call, Sarah immediately started pulling up Solara's financials and market projections. "Dad, this is huge," she exclaimed. "A solar farm project in Nevada. Think of the environmental impact, the publicity. This aligns perfectly with our diversification strategy." Michael was already sketching out potential acquisition targets for specialized solar installation companies. We could leverage this to build a whole new division within Kowalski Construction. I listened, a cautious optimism stirring within me. Large infrastructure projects were my bread and butter, and the idea of building something that harnessed clean energy, that held a certain appeal. Nevada desert, I mused. That's a brutal environment. Extreme heat, sandstorms, logistical nightmares. It's not going to be a walk in the park. That's why we need to be strategic, Sarah said, already typing furiously on her laptop. We can use our integrated management system to track every component, every installation, down to the last bolt. We'll have real-time data on weather patterns, material procurement, crew deployment. And what about the ground, Sarah? I interrupted. What about the unique challenges of the desert soil, the potential for flash floods? Do your systems account for those variables? Our geological surveys will cover that, Dad, Michael assured me, and we'll have local experts on board. Besides, this is a chance for us to showcase our modern approach. We can integrate cutting-edge technology and sustainable building practices to create a truly groundbreaking project. I could see their minds already racing ahead, envisioning the sleek reports, the impressive profit margins, the national recognition. But I also saw the raw, unvarnished reality of the Nevada desert. I saw the relentless sun, the unforgiving terrain, the sheer brute force required to tame that landscape. This isn't just about technology, kids, I said, my voice firm. It's about understanding the land. It's about respect for the environment we're working in. It's about building something that endures, not just something that looks good on a spreadsheet. Chen called again a few days later. Sarah and Michael handled much of the initial discussion, but I insisted on speaking with him directly. Mr. Chen, I said, I want to be up front. This project will be challenging. The desert is unforgiving. We'll need to be adaptable, resourceful, and prepared for the unexpected. My team has the experience to handle it, but it will require more than just efficient management. It will require grit. Chen's response was immediate and reassuring. Mr. Kowalski, that's exactly why we contacted you. We're not looking for a company that just follows a script. We need a partner who understands that building something significant, something lasting, requires more than just technology. It requires a deep understanding of the fundamentals and the willingness to roll up their sleeves. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of genuine excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this project would be an opportunity for my children to see that the old ways, the hands-on grit and determination approach, still held immense value. Maybe they would finally understand that technology was a tool, not a replacement, for the fundamental principles of building. The Nevada desert, with all its challenges, might just be the crucible where our different approaches could finally find common ground. The Nevada desert was a beast. The sun beat down with an intensity that felt like a physical blow. The air shimmered with heat, and the vast empty landscape stretched to the horizon, a stark, beautiful, and unforgiving canvas. Kowalski Construction was building Solara Solutions' massive solar farm, a project that was testing every aspect of our company, and more importantly, every aspect of my children's approach to business. Sarah and Michael had initially approached the project with their usual corporate zeal, armed with spreadsheets, Gantt charts, and sophisticated management software. But the desert had a way of humbling even the most meticulously planned operations. Dad, the sandstorms are wreaking havoc on our equipment, Sarah reported, her voice strained over the crackling phone line. The dust is getting into everything. We're experiencing significant downtime. And the heat, Michael added, sounding exhausted. Our crews are working shorter shifts, but productivity is still down. We're struggling to maintain the installation schedule. I knew this was coming. I'd warned them. The desert wasn't a controlled environment. It was a force of nature. Have you adjusted your work schedules? I asked. Are your crews starting before dawn, working through the cooler parts of the day? We've implemented staggered shifts, Dad, Sarah replied, but it's not enough. The sheer volume of work and the environmental conditions are overwhelming our current deployment. Deployment, I repeated, the word feeling sterile and inadequate. You need to think about keeping your men safe and effective, not just deploying them. Have you considered bringing in more local labor? People who understand how to work in this heat, who know how to manage the sand. We're looking into it, Dad, Michael said, though his tone lacked conviction. But finding qualified personnel on short notice is difficult. The real problem, I suspected, wasn't just the environment. It was their reliance on systems that couldn't fully account for the unpredictable nature of the desert. They were trying to impose order on chaos, to manage a wild landscape with the tools of a city office. One afternoon I received a call from Dave, my site supervisor. Frank, we've got a problem with the concrete foundations for the main control building. The ground's softer than we expected in some areas. The initial surveys didn't pick it up. We need to re-engineer the footings, and it's going to cost us time and money. This was exactly the kind of on-the-ground problem that their software couldn't foresee. It required experience, observation, and a willingness to adapt. I flew out to Nevada. Seeing the situation firsthand, I understood the depth of the challenge. The desert floor, deceptively solid, hid pockets of loose, sandy soil, I gathered Sarah, Michael, and Dave around the affected area. "This isn't about hitting a deadline anymore," I stated, my voice cutting through the desert wind. "This is about building something that will stand for decades. We need to reinforce these foundations. It means more digging, more concrete, more time, but it's the only way to do it right." Sarah looked distraught. "Dad, the investors are already concerned about the delays. Re-engineering this section will push us back even further. Can't we find a less labor-intensive solution?" "There isn't one," I said firmly, "not if we want this facility to last." Sometimes the gamble is not in cutting corners to meet a deadline, but in investing the time and resources to do it right, no matter the cost. I turned to Dave. "Dave, get me a team. I want to oversee this reinforcement myself. I want to make sure it's done correctly." Watching me, Sarah and Michael slowly began to understand. They saw the raw effort, the hands-on problem-solving, the sheer determination required to overcome the desert's challenges. They saw that experience, intuition, and a deep respect for the fundamentals were just as crucial as any sophisticated management system. The Nevada gamble was proving to be a harsh but effective teacher, forcing them to confront the concrete reality of construction, a reality far removed from their pristine boardrooms. The Nevada project was in full swing, and while the challenges remained, something had shifted. The initial friction between my children's corporate approach and the harsh realities of the desert environment had begun to give way to a grudging respect, and perhaps even a nascent understanding. The re-engineering of the control building foundations, overseen by me, had been a success, albeit a costly one. But the solid, reinforced structures that now stood testament to that effort seemed to have imparted a valuable lesson. I noticed the change, subtly at first. Sarah, usually glued to her tablet, started spending more time on site, asking Dave specific questions about the pouring techniques and the curing process of the concrete. Michael, instead of just relaying data, began engaging more directly with the crews, listening to their concerns about the heat and the logistics. One sweltering afternoon, as I was inspecting the installation of the solar panels, Sarah approached me, holding not her tablet, but a worn, hard hat. "Dad," she began, her voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about what you said about the human element. Our system tracks progress, but it doesn't always capture the nuances, the experience of the men on the ground." She trailed off, looking genuinely thoughtful. "It's about more than just data, Sarah," I replied, nodding. "It's about knowing the material, understanding the forces at play, and trusting the people who do the work." "I'm starting to see that," she admitted. "The delays we've faced haven't just been logistical. They've been about overcoming unexpected environmental challenges, about the sheer physical demands of this place. Our systems are good for managing predictable tasks, but this project is anything but predictable." Later that week, Michael came to me with a different kind of proposal. "Dad, we've been talking. The acquisition strategy for the West Coast is still on the table, but we want to integrate it differently. Instead of just absorbing companies, we want to create a mentorship program, pair our younger managers with experienced individuals from the acquired firms, and vice versa. We want to foster knowledge transfer, not just operational consolidation." I looked at Michael, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "Mentorship. That's a good word, Michael. That's how you build something lasting. You pass down what you know, and you learn from others. And we want to implement a site ambassador program," Sarah added, her eyes brighter now. Experienced foremen like Dave would have a formal role in advising project managers on the practical realities of construction, especially on challenging sites. Their insights would be formally recognized and incorporated into our planning. It wasn't a complete capitulation, not by a long shot. They still believed in the power of technology and efficient systems. But they were beginning to understand that those systems were only as good as the people who used them, and that experience, intuition, and human connection were invaluable assets. They were starting to bridge the generational divide, not by abandoning their vision, but by integrating it with the wisdom of the past. The Nevada project, with all its trials and tribulations, was becoming more than just a construction job. It was becoming a classroom, a proving ground where the future of Kowalski construction was being forged, not through conquest, but through a deeper understanding and a shared respect for the art and science of building. It was a difficult, often frustrating process, but seeing them begin to grasp the fundamentals, to value the unseen labor, made all the struggles worthwhile. The Nevada sun beat down, but today it felt less like an adversary and more like a testament to what we had accomplished. The solar farm, a sprawling testament to clean energy and human ingenuity, was nearing completion. Rows upon rows of gleaming panels stretched as far as the eye could see, a powerful symbol of progress. Standing beside me, not with tablets and reports, but with a genuine sense of accomplishment etched on their faces, were Sarah and Michael. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been clashes, moments of profound disagreement, and a palpable sense of frustration as my children grappled with the messy, unpredictable reality of construction. But they had learned. "It's incredible, Dad," Sarah said, her voice filled with awe as she gazed out at the vast expanse of panels. "I never imagined it would look like this. All the planning, the execution, it's a monumental achievement." Michael nodded, a wide smile on his face. "And the team. They've really pulled together. Even with the challenges, they found a way to get it done. Dave and his crew, they're something else." "They are," I agreed, my heart full. "They always have been. That's the foundation of this company, kids. Not the spreadsheets, not the software, but the people who show up day after day and get their hands dirty." The Nevada project had been a crucible, forging a new understanding within the Kowalski family and within the company itself. Sarah and Michael hadn't abandoned their modern business acumen, but they had learned to temper it with the hard-won wisdom of experience. They understood now that efficiency without integrity was hollow, and that technology, while powerful, was no substitute for human connection and practical know-how. "We're still going to pursue the West Coast expansion," Sarah stated, her voice now holding a newfound blend of ambition and pragmatism. "But we're going to do it differently. The mentorship program, the site ambassador roles, they're not just buzzwords anymore, they're essential components of how we build. And we're going to prioritize building relationships with our subcontractors," Michael added, "not just transactional deals. We need partners we can rely on, just like you always have, Dad. We learned that here, facing the desert." I looked at my children, and I saw not just inheritors of my legacy, but builders in their own right. They had learned the value of grit, of perseverance, of the tangible satisfaction of creating something real, something that made a difference. They had seen that true success wasn't just about profit margins, but about the integrity of the work and the well-being of the people who did it. As we stood there, the desert wind whipping around us, I felt a profound sense of peace. The foundation I had laid all those years ago, with nothing but sweat and a dream, had proven strong enough to support not just buildings, but a new generation of leadership. They might not have started by lifting bricks, but they had learned the value of the hands that did, and in doing so, they had built a new foundation for Kowalski construction, one that blended the best of the old and the new, ensuring that the company would not only endure, but continue to build, to create, and to leave a lasting mark on the world. The dream, it seemed, was far from over. It was just entering its next vital phase.